All right, it's 8:30. Welcome to the Roundtable with Itohan right here on Clean Beat 91.5 FM Abuja, where music meets clarity. Well, today on the Roundtable, we're flipping things a bit. Usually we'll begin with a paper review, but right now we're starting with the conversation because our Director General is seated in the studio. And, when people like this, high and mighty come into your studio, you have to move things around because they're very busy. But anyway, we'll begin immediately. So we're looking at the nexus between drug abuse and insecurity in Nigeria. Now, as you know, Nigeria's rate of drug use is nearly 3 times the global average, most of it among our young people. And on the other hand, an insecurity crisis that has spread from remote borders into our cities. Terrorism, banditry, kidnapping, cultism, and, the most of it. Now, today we ask the crucial question: how are these two crises feeding each other? What is the nexus between drug abuse and insecurity in Nigeria? Now, just this week, stakeholders jointly declared that substance abuse amongst youths, in their words, the central driver of rising terrorism, kidnapping, cultism, violent crime. Now, security investigations, they say, consistently identify narcotics as a primary enabler of major violent offenses. Military commanders report that nearly every Boko Haram camp they overrun is littered with drug paraphernalia, especially tramadol, at doses that would, in one official's words, knock out a horse. All right. Our guest today is the Director General of the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, IPCR, in Abuja. He possesses over 20 years of experience in multidisciplinary peace, conflict, and social integration. He has sector-specific skills in policy formulation, diagnostic, and prognostic analytical research, explicitly related to peace building, conflict transformation, and resolution. Now, his leadership, organization development, also policy analysis, social development is top-notch. And he takes leadership role in promoting methodological approaches to conflict mitigation activities and program management strategies. He also specializes in using political economy analysis tools and approaches to deliver evidence-based report for clients. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Joseph Ochogwu. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Yeah, thank you so very much.
It feels really surreal to see you this morning.
I'm happy being at Clean Beat 91.5 FM Abuja, the NDLE headquarters. Yes. And I just want to thank you and the NDLE for the very great work you people are doing, trying to mitigate, reduce issues around drug abuse, from the supply side to the demand side.
That's right.
It's a very hectic assignment. And I must say on the premise that without drug as an enabler, we'll have a very peaceful society. And every violent crime you see, the major enabler actually is drug. Those who are into drug abuse, those who are drug addicts, the point I'm trying to make is that there is no sane human being, no normal human being that is likely going to commit an act of violence in the scale that we see. Either armed robbery, either knife crime, whatever crime that you see that is violent prone is influenced most likely by drugs.
By drugs.
Because in an average, there is no normal human being that is likely going to do anything that is violent to a fellow human being. And I think that tells you the very delicate nature of the work, that the NDLE is doing. And that is why it needs a whole of society approach. It's not a job we can leave to the NDLE alone. The NDLE is doing their own super work in terms of the intelligence, the nabbing, the interdictions, and everything, that they are doing. But we need a whole of society engagement, to support the work that they do, to reduce this menace. And I think that society is also culpable, in this entire drug abuse menace.
Yeah, what do you mean culpable?
Yeah, society is culpable in the sense that the celebration of illicit wealth, goes side by side, with illicit trafficking of drugs or arms or whatever thing that you are saying. Where you have a society that celebrates wealth that is unknown and is substantiated, and will provide them with chieftaincy titles and give them all the pathways and gateways, into the peak and the height of our society, then we are enabling those kind of crimes. So we must be able to get society, to begin to reverse itself on certain kind of values that they meet. Otherwise, it's going to be a whole lot of challenge, for not only the drug law agency, but for other security agencies, and all that. So we need a whole lot of value reorientation in terms of how we prioritize wealth, in our society, and wealth becomes everything. So we need to find a way to moderate our society.
Now, when we talk about crime and insecurity, a lot of analysts and stakeholders have, said that the target mostly it's youth, young people. And from your using the security lens now, why do you think that is happening, especially with young people? Why the focus?
The youth demography is the most significant demography of our population, and I think they are the highest in number. And then of course the youth population are the most energetic and the most productive sector of any society, particularly even our society. So if we have the youth population, that the youth population is the highest, in number, and they are the most significant, more productive, much more curious and inquisitive set of people.
Okay.
They are much more vulnerable, much more susceptible, in terms of becoming drug abuser or becoming even couriers, in terms of supporting what that means. Because at that point, at that stage in time, from that age of 16, 18, into 30-something, it's a transition stage where you want to belong to society, and all that. And because of the way our society is also structured, the opportunities are a bit minimal, for our youth population. So the tendency for them, to go towards vices, not only drug, whatever, Yahoo, any kind of vices that is there, the temptation is very, very high. And that is why we need target-specific youth-oriented programs, across different segments of the society, to try to make our youths much more functional.
Okay.
Because when you go into drug or crime, you become dysfunctional to society. The tendency that you die early as a youth is always there. So the Nigerian youths must understand that they have to be functional. They have to work to build the nation. They have to work to build the Nigerian state. They have to work in peace-building sectors, to ensure, they live longer and become much more valuable to themselves, and they're able to reproduce the next generation. Otherwise, they're going to short-circuit their life.
So that means you have to engage them continuously.
No, endlessly.
Endlessly.
We have to engage the youths endlessly. You understand the point? Because if you look at their psychology, the psychology of an average youth, either a teenager, a young youth from the university and all that, there is this language they use. Majority of them want to hammer.
Yes, yeah.
So in the quest for hammering, and they don't know that in life there is no quick fix, in terms of quick entry point to wealth. Wealth is an enduring process, very, very enduring, at times tiring, you keep working at it, you keep moving at it. At times you never get there, but you never get poor. Yeah. When you do functional job, the truth is that you might never be rich, but you never get poor. So society provides an average. It's all over the world, But if you want to get rich, you go into entrepreneurship. Where at a point, innovations. You get skills and then you find solution to society's problem. But if not, you find a much more functional job and then you contribute on a more larger note, on a larger scale with different people. So Nigerian youths must begin to reorientate themselves to go out of crime, because the level of insecurity we are seeing in the country today is really, really appalling. There are a lot of factors to it, but my counsel will be that it has always been like this. Most youths must have to be functional. And the society provides some much support in terms of how youths, can be much more functional. The education sector is there. The faith section is there in terms of religious organizations. They are all there. Other social clubs, are all there. So you can't see, for example, a JC club or Rotary club, and then go and join a secret society. Already the societal laws, the policing, the DSS, the NDLE, the correctional center, all those ones, the laws are there for you to abide. So why go get into a secret society where the law, restricts you and then puts you under unnecessary pressure to do what you are not supposed to do? So I think youths must avoid the path for secret cult, because oftentimes most members of secret cult society have tendency for drug abuse.
Okay.
And they have tendency for violence. Then other youths who are on the street, who are not in school and don't have opportunity for secret society, who associate into peer group pressure, particularly those ones who stay in the street, who are into maybe peddling or some kind of group associations and all that. We must find a way also, a bit of social orientation. I can tell you for free that the NDLE is doing so much. It's not that I'm in their studio. Yes.
You would say it anywhere.
No, yeah, because
Yes.
actually when I did some state tours, I
Yeah.
visited NDLA and some other federal agencies in the respective states.
Okay.
And they are doing enormous work, I can tell you. They are not only doing the intelligence component to beat the supply side, they are also involved in the demand side in terms of trying to rehabilitate.
Yes.
Primarily that shouldn't be their function. But they see the crisis, that is in these communities, and then they take that up onto themselves. And they're also doing rehabilitations of drug addicts,
That's right.
in states. I was in Katsina, I was in Kaduna, and then Plateau. And I did all those visits to those places there, including NDLA state offices in those places there. So they need all the supports that we need. And this is why I'm saying they need all the supports that they need. Because drug is at the peak, of whatever restlessness and restiveness, that we have in our society. So if we're able to deal with the drug menace, then sufficiently every other things, will fall in line.
Okay.
So like I said in one particular conference, if we want a peaceful society, we have to go for a drug-free society.
A drug-free society.
Yeah.
All right. So how do you react to? Okay, I'm going to read this for you now. In May 2026, the NDLA dismantled a methamphetamine super lab in Ogun State, which I visited last week, and also in the month of June, just a few weeks later, that's on the 17th of June 2026, they smashed a second industrial-scale lab deep in the forest in Oyo State. Now, Nigeria moving from transit consumption to production base.
Exactly.
How do you react to this as a security person? What exactly can you see from your end?
I think that is alarming. That is alarming because it means that our country, Nigeria, is providing incentive for transnational organized crime. And that is why when you see the caliber of people that were caught in the Met Lab, I think in Oyo State or Ogun State,
yeah.
you see the presence of Mexicans.
Yes.
And if you know the history and the antecedents of the Latin American narcotic industry, you know that they are highly organized. These are people that have airplanes, they have submarines, they have a whole lot of troops. That is they run
a cartel.
Yes, they run a parallel state. So if we allow them into our place, then we're going to face what we can. Like you rightly said, we've moved from being transit, bring couriers.
Yes.
Now we are into consumption, and then now we are into production, which makes it much, much, much more difficult for the drug law enforcement agency. And that is why the issue of drugs should not be, like I said in my opening, should not be left with the NDLA alone. There should be opportunity for shared intelligence, which I'm sure is going on, for every other structures of the state apparatuses, that are involved in security, paramilitary, whatever, to also assist the agency to look at the drug component.
Okay.
Whether a youth is going into drug, the police, picks it up. Overall, actually, these are policing functions, that we are diversified, in terms of road safety, drug law, and several other crimes, that you are seeing. But what we're trying to say is that there should be a lot of interagency support system, to ensure that these things are nabbed. I mean, the Met Lab wouldn't have been there for long and producing and all that without, for example, some agents of the states, I get to know and then pass the information. And also there is now better need, for more community early warning, early response system.
Okay.
Not only in the conflict thing that we do, but to also look at issues around enablers, where traditional institutions, faith-based institutions also are involved, at the community level. First and foremost to know, because if we deal with these things, we are dealing with the entire insecurity problem too that we are facing.
Okay.
So there are the soft side, that we need to deal with, which I think oftentimes lesser attentions are paid to, which is what I'm talking about in terms of the community level, early warning, early response system, where you build a community level structure that responds to the state, that helps the state, to carry out its own function. Because the state alone cannot perform the sole responsibility of law and order.
Does this also help, tackle the issue of ungoverned spaces as well?
No, of course. We must applaud the president for expounding the divisions, the military divisions. What that means is that it's going to cover a lot of areas in terms of the presence of military forces. We are also happy that the state policing issue also is coming up, big time. We also need to get our local government right. I think that is where the major problem is. The weaknesses and the absence of local governments, over the 774 local government and over the 8,090 something political wards in the country where the presence of government is very weak. And you can see that if you look at the manpower capacity of the NDLEA, the DSS, the police and all that, they can't meet up all these things. That is why we say we need a whole of society, whole of government approach in dealing with these things. And the whole of government, whole of society is not only the federal government. The state government must be deeply involved. The local governments must be deeply involved. The wards also have to be deeply involved because we need to carry our people along.
Okay.
We can't leave citizens
at the local government level.
At the local government level, because if the local government is not functioning, then it therefore means that the efforts of the federal government and the state government is going to be minimal. The effect of what they are doing is going to be minimal because the local government system is a frontline mechanism, for conflict prevention, conflict management, and conflict resolution, where the state and the citizens meet.
So you're saying that the reason why these meth labs were cited in those deep forests is because the local government is not functional?
Absolutely. Because in local government, you have local government health department, you have social welfare department, you have education department, you have the works department, you have even the population office, that is there. So if these officials are working at those local government levels,
and someone comes into your community, you will know.
They will know. And then they are embedded also, with the traditional institutions and everybody, and then the farmers and everybody too. There is a sense of belonging, a sense of community, a sense of nationhood, a sense of citizenship, which I think is lacking right now, at those respective places. And these criminals, they come with funds, so they come with a lot of incentives. So they can buy up traditional rulers, they can buy up communities, they can do a whole lot of things, and all that. And then the villagers don't even know what is happening there because they don't know what is meth lab.
Yes.
No, that is true.
Yes.
They might just think they are producing something and they are going to sell, and then they are giving them money and cuts, and all that. So we need a whole lot of enlightenment. The education sector has to be deeply involved, with the drug law enforcement agency to help them do their work.
All right. So as we're still speaking to the DG IPCR, and he's still here, Dr. Joseph Ochogwu. Let's talk about following the money now. Beyond using drugs, now these groups have accused of trafficking them. How significant is the drug trade as a source of funding for terrorism and banditry?
You cannot isolate them. They are actually a reinforcing enabler, for the kind of it's a huge profit. I mean, if you see the catches, that the arrest that the NDLA has made in the last couple of weeks, the ingenuity of these traffickers in terms of reconfiguring entire vehicular system, to be able to carry their destiny. I think if it's not for intelligence, they would have gone. That is why we must commend NDLE intelligence sector, for picking up on those things there. We have men and women who sincerely actually working for this country, and we must applaud them and find a way, to actually reward them. Yes, So there is a connection between the profit, that illicit drugs, give, to people. I mean, some of these things are produced, under very questionable conditions. They are imported or exported under very questionable conditions. So it's a huge market, actually. We call it the gray market. That is the black market.
The black market.
Where a lot of things are not known in the open. Where just one particular shipment, gives you. That is why the incentive for people to swallow it is there. You see people swallow drugs and then they want to travel with it. Recently, there is one where a man took it and then they were trying to get it off his anus as if he was delivering. So there is a whole lot of things that people really need to know, that drug abuse, getting involved in drug trafficking or whatever thing, does not make any sense. If you look at how drugs have condemned the life of people in terms of the effect, of drug, then it's not something you can do. And the issue of drug is not for developing country or developed country. It's a global challenge. And once you are allowed to enter into society, if you ever meet a drug addict, you see how wasteful it will waste anybody. It wastes an entire family who gradually go into drug addictions. Normal people, even medical doctors or professionals who go into drug abuse, and how it ruins them completely, because it gets you. An addict is something that you can't do without it, so you are dependent, on it. So that takes you from being a normal person to an abnormal
Normal
person,
person.
because you need the influence of this particular drug to carry. So the profiting is very huge. And that is why off the counter, medications are not encouraged. I think that the Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria and the Pharmaceutical Council of Nigeria need to do more in terms of the kind of dispensing, the way they dispense drugs in this country, where people can just go across the counter. Somebody have a dispenser, have opened a shop, he's selling all sorts of drugs, and all that, and people can just buy. So I think that we need more proper regulation. Identification, registrations, of everybody who is dispensing drug in this country. And then we need to know their specific locations and the batches of drugs so they are taken to their places. So there is a whole lot of work that needs to be done. Here the Pharmaceutical Council comes in,
Yes.
the Federal Ministry and the State Ministry of Health and the local health departments also come on board to work in synergy, because we need real proper regulation of this sector to minimize, the endemic nature of drug abuse in our society.
Well, you highlighted the fact that the NDLA is doing a lot, and also other security agencies. What do you also have to say about the exposure of our youth to drugs and illicit drugs by social media and also with music videos everywhere? Because if you're trying to combat the use of drugs, you should also ensure that these people are not, visually, seeing it from celebrities or people that they hold in high esteem. What do you have to say about that? Especially with the regulate, I think it's the Nigeria Videos Film and Censors Board, exactly. So
you see, this is where the power of regulation comes in. We like copycatting a lot, but it's not long. The Australian government banned the use of social media for children under 16, and the United Kingdom too follows suit. What that tells you that is a global problem. The social media is a weapon, and it's something that we must find a way, to regulate them, to an extent. Because if you don't regulate them, you give opportunity for a laissez-faire, free for all, people, to engage in all sorts of things. In this phone, if you say, I want to become a Satan, how do I become a Satan? It will pop up for you. Yeah, if you say,
Yes.
I want to be like God.
Yes,
It
will
will
give
give
you,
it to
it
you.
will advise you.
Yeah, so we must find a way whereby we are able to make it much more functional for our society. We must not be ashamed to take some drastic measures that we need to take based on our own local context. I think that as government, as people, we owe ourselves the responsibility to regulate ourselves to a way where we think that we can live a much more better life and a much more better society for the future generation of our people. So if you say customs and traditions and laws are made by men, based on their existential realities. So if we find an existential threat to our existence as a people, we must also bring out measures, laws,
Yes.
sanctioning mechanisms to ensure that our people, our citizens also abide by those things so we can have a much more better society.
Would you advise the NDLA to push for more restraining laws as it concerns, drug trafficking in Nigeria?
No, as a matter of fact, they need it more than ever before.
More than ever before,
Yeah,
okay.
because of our population, our size is becoming huge, for market, and also know that we are going through a reform process. And reform comes with its own difficulties also, because you need those pains, to arrive at gain. So in this period of pains, people become a bit vulnerable, to all sorts of things and all that. So we need a much more tighter regulations, particularly for drug traffickers who are becoming
emboldened.
Like I said before, when society also celebrates illicit wealth, then illicit trafficking, either in ammunitions, in drugs and everything, become much more, and contrabands become much more common. So our critical infrastructure also, will a normal human being go and be harvesting critical infrastructure that supply electricity or provide rail services and all that? So we need to deal with these things holistically, not one-off things. So you can see the reinforcing nature of illicit drug consumptions, and insecurity in this country. So it's very huge.
Okay, I must ask you this question before you go, because I know you're already looking at the time to run away. But commentators have criticized safe corridor, de-radicalization programs to return repentant insurgents to communities. Aren't you worried that someone who has been a criminal and also has abused drugs, reintegrated into society, would definitely return to that vice?
No, I think that there is a misconception on the issue of repentant Boko Haram or repentant insurgents and all that. There is a whole lot of work that goes into the process. There is no state. There are brilliant men and women in the services of this country. So when I read in the newspaper, they say repentant Boko Haram, join the force and all that. No, it is not true. There is a very serious profiling processes, that goes into either those who have surrendered or those, they profile you. There is a profiling system. In that profiling system are very qualified people from the Federal Ministry of Justice, people from the DSS, people from the military intelligence, people from the Nigerian Correctional Center. I'm sure even the drug NDLA, so they're involved. So it's a whole of government approach in terms of how do we deal with this problem.
Okay.
I mean, the point is that when people are profiled, for example, you cannot say a woman, a lady who was abducted from her community and is associated, just listen to that word, associated,
Okay.
or children that are associated with insurgent groups, you begin to give them the same kind of measure that you give to their commanders or you give to their fighters. So the profiling system isolates those components, those hardened ones, the fighters and all that. And I can tell you that the federal government is prosecuting well over 11,000
of these criminals.
Yes, of insurgents, particularly the insurgent groups, they are prosecuting them. So those groups are particularly different, from the ones people call repentant that are going through the reintegration processes, and all that. The media too must take time to go and look at what exactly is on the ground. The missing link, in the entire Operation Safe Corridor, which we are working with the system, with the Ministry of Defense, to try to correct, is the aspect of peace building and reconciliation. Which was missing, in the earlier period. And I think that myself, General Yusuf, and some other stakeholders, we're working to see how that is corrected with the Ministry of Defense, to put that particular area of peace building and reconciliation, to ensure that reconciliatory efforts are made.
Because if the people don't see it from that point of view, it will be quite difficult.
Exactly. So, and people need more enlightenment on
this. Maybe you should take me along with some of these journeys when you have them. I'm willing to go with you so I can learn more from it.
No problem. Yes. We'll look at it.
All right. Now let's end on this note that we've talked about the nexus between drugs and insecurity. Now, what does this mean now for Nigeria's future from all of this analysis that you've put forward today?
Nigeria will have a much more peaceful society if we have a drug abuse-free society. If we name shame, because now what we need to do beyond our law system is to shame people. Is to shame people who we catch as culprit. We need to open up our legal system to be in tune with our cultures and tradition. Nobody wants to be shamed, whether as family or as individual and all that. We need to put our legal system to ensure that we're able to shame individuals, who put us in disrepute, who put us in problem that we are facing. So I think that component is something that we need to deal with. By the time you begin to shame people will give way and begin to become much more functional.
All right. And also with what the NDLA is doing, you said you've given them a high commendation, but, more work still needs to be done. But it can't be left for the NDLA. Everyone needs to be involved. And how do we do that? Is it just see something, say something, or be more involved?
I think see something, say something, be more involved. You just said it all.
Yes.
We all have to be more involved. And then we have to speak good of agencies that are doing very well and then provide them incentives too that can help them, to do their work, because it's very, very important. If you don't incentivize an official, you're going to make him the tendency, for corruption to come in. The tendency for sellout is going to come in. So if we need to deal with this problem, we need to take care of our officials very, very well, to ensure that they are not susceptible or vulnerable, to the temptation, to become accomplice, or whatever, to some of the things they are trying to fight. And I think that is not for the NDLA. We need to do it across board. Across the different people, working for the state system to make sure that they are able to deliver on their mandate.
Thank you so much. I know you have another meeting to get into right now, but we'll let you go. Sadly, I'll let you go. I had to run through. I didn't even scratch the surface for this interview, but I'm willing to let you go. We've been speaking with the Director General of the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution in Abuja, Dr. Joseph Ochogwu. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We'll quickly go on a break so I can quickly take a picture with the doc, and then when we come back, we'll look at the papers. Do stay with us. The Roundtable with Itohan right here on Clean Beat 91.5 FM. Abuja continues. Good morning.